Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the very last session for today and for this event. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everyone joining us live as well. Let's have a quick flashback of what you have learned and what we have covered in the past 2 days, and then I'm going to introduce you to this last session. So in the very first day, we explored the future of ELT. We considered whether we have a bright future or a dark one. In the second session, we considered whether we should teach answers to our students or we should teach them how to find the answers. And then we focused on storytelling as a language teaching tool and how we can make our students to retell our stories. And finally, today, for the first session, we considered what is a good practice and how we can design good practices. In this very last session, we are going to focus on mixed ability classrooms, and Jeremy is going to tell us how we can deal with them effectively. So please enjoy this last session, and welcome Jeremy Harder to this stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I start, I just want to say, because this is my opportunity to say it, that this event has been organised by the British Council and especially by this man here. And I think you know and I know that speaking here or attending here, that's the easy part. But all the work that goes into arranging it, organising it, setting everything up, and then all the volunteers out there who make it all seem so effortless and easy. So I just have one request, which is, as you leave this afternoon, will you go and thank each one and every one of them outside and thank them for what they've been doing, because it seems to me just like a lovely and beautifully organised event, and I'm very proud. Thank you very much. And again, as Ade said, hello to the people who are watching the live stream. I hope you have a nice time this last session. I hope you've been able to take part in the last 3 sessions, 1, 2, 3, 4 sessions. So here we are again for the last one. And just before we start, a question that has been preoccupying me since, I think, Friday evening is this whole issue of whether or not we should teach cursive writing, which is an issue that one of our visitors from Iran raised, because he, like everyone, is concerned to know whether teaching students how to do handwriting properly is any longer relevant in 2017. And since on Friday evening we were talking about the changes and the future and technology, there is a good case for arguing that kids don't need to be able to handwrite anymore, because so much of what we do seems to take place on screens, often just using our fingers to select letters. Indeed, research seems to suggest that for many people, the most handwriting we now do is shorthand writing, to write shopping lists or things to memorize and so on and so forth. And I don't have the answer to this question, except, and I recommend you to read this, that by coincidence, currently on the BBC news site, there is a whole article about this. I don't know if you've seen it, but for example, the state of Illinois in the USA has just voted to override the governor's decision. The governor of Illinois said we were going to stop cursive writing, but the state legislature has overridden it, said no, we're going to continue teaching kids cursive writing. The arguments against are obvious. They're the lives we're all leading right now, which are increasingly keyboard or finger sort of oriented rather than using a pen or a pencil. But the arguments in favor, which this short article articulates very well, are that, for example, teaching kids how to write letters helps them to recognize letters better than just having them select letters on a screen does. The arguments are that studies suggest that when people use handwriting for note-taking, it seems to have a more positive effect on brain processing than just typing things up. And one thing it said here which fascinates me is the idea that when people take notes in a lecture using a keyboard, they appear to just try and write down the whole lecture. But when people write notes using handwriting, what they seem to try to do, what we seem to try and do, is to sort of summarize or identify key points and that kind of thing. The jury is out, and if we have this conversation in 10 years, I wonder where we will have got to. But it's an extremely interesting case, and I don't know what you think about it. But have a look at this BBC website anyway, which, of course, in the brave new world we're in, I have only found out by sitting at lunchtime playing with my phone, because that's the world we live in. It strikes me that I haven't bought a physical newspaper, but I don't know for how long. Do you buy physical newspapers? Yes? Did you used to buy physical newspapers? Yeah, well, I did. But anyway, enough. But that's the best answer I can come up with to your question. But it's been preoccupying me, and I'm sorry because I've strayed outside my area of expertise. But just like you, and as a teacher, it really interests me. I don't teach young children. But if I did, I would face that decision. It's an interesting issue, it seems to me. Okay, so last session, here we go. I want to tell you a quick story of a few years ago. And I was contacted by the people from this building, which you probably don't recognize, but it's in Cambridge, which, as I've said, is where I live. They can't hear you. Can you not hear me well? Can you not hear me well? Or would you prefer me to use the microphone? Okay. I was just hoping not to have so much furniture. But that's what vanity does for you. I apologize. Where are we? How about that? Yeah, it is clearer, I'm sorry to say. Okay, does anyone recognize that building? There's no reason why you should. It's in Cambridge, and it's a language school called the Bell School. And it's been there since about 1960 something. It's a lovely house, and it's the advantage for me is that it's a few blocks from where I live. And a few years ago, they rang me up in the summer and said, would I please run a 2-week teacher development course? They had a group of teachers coming from Taiwan, the island of Taiwan, and they would like someone to do teacher development with them for 2 weeks. And yeah, okay, that sounds interesting, I'll give it a try. And what they told me was that all of these Taiwanese teachers had been selected and vetted in Taiwan, and they all were coming with B2 plus English. So we could work on issues to do with pedagogy and development and so on like that. When they arrived, there were 12 of them. When they arrived, it turned out the reality was somewhat different. Extremely different. In the group was one person who was at least C2, indistinguishable from, she was just a hugely competent speaker of English. And one person who was kind of C2 almost, and one person who was about C1. And then we went down through the levels until we got to 2 people who were 0. They didn't have any English except for maybe hello or good morning or something. And these were my companions for 2 weeks. And just me. And I had to work with them as a group. And what did I think? I thought, help.
Just Google.
Well, this was when was this? It was just before Google, I think, or you know, we're talking about 1998, 1999, something like that. And I wanted to back out, but I couldn't really because I'd agreed to do it, and I complained, and they said, well, yeah, sorry. So what did I do? Well, that's the context of this talk, and I'll tell you at the end what I did. Yes, I'll tell you what I did at the end. But of course, that group was, in a sense, an exaggerated version of every group you have ever taught. Which is to say that, as I said yesterday, you can get a group of kids from the same town, in the same province of maybe even the same street of Armenia or Iran or Russia or Georgia or wherever it is, and you get them in the same room, and you have an expectation that they're going to be the same. But it's not true. So when people talk about mixed ability as if it was something rare and troubling, it's not. It's just life. I like what Helsinki says. So I think that's a very nice statement of what about our daily lives, which is every single group we've got is made up of different strengths, students with different strengths, different weaknesses, different learning, dedication. We had the word yesterday about talking about dedication, with different language abilities, with different abilities to concentrate, and so on and so forth. Different motivations as well, because they come from different families. And they have different personalities, and they fall over cables and things like that. Thank you so much. And that's the reality we are dealt as teachers. Anytime you teach more than one person at a time, you have a diversity of strengths and weaknesses, preferences, dedicationalism, than anything else. So the question is, what do we do about it? What do we all do about it? Well, I'm going to run through things that you've all read about, and you've all discussed, and you've all studied about, which will be very familiar to you. And then later on, we're going to get to some, well, you'll see. So, for example, a classic way of dealing with mixed ability is to give different students different work. Do you do that?
Yes. Yes.
What kind of different work?
For example, you can give them authentic test to stronger learners and simplified variant to weaker learners.
So you can give the authentic version of something to stronger learners, and a simplified version to weaker learners. We'll come to that in a minute. At the moment, I'm interested in the different work. Sorry, I should have explained. There's different tasks. Different tasks. Do you give students different tasks? How do you do that? How do you do that? What do you do? I like Evans's idea that you can think of tasks as a menu, and you've got mains and sides and desserts, and you can offer those as different alternatives. You were going to say something.
Find adjectives. example, to someone. Yes, ask questions to someone.
You could ask questions to some lot. You could get other ones to find adjectives. You can give different tasks. You can give and treat it like a menu. Or there's this lovely idea for primary kids of saying what kind of food you want. Do you want mild, medium, or spicy? And saying to kids, you can choose which one you want to do. Do you do this kind of thing? I'm just trying to get do you do this kind of thing? Ish? No? Not really? The idea of this is simply to say, I know that my students have differing strengths and weaknesses, so I'm going to offer you a variety of tasks, and either I'm going to decide whether you're the stronger or the weaker, whatever phrase we want to use, or I'm going to say to you, why don't you choose what you would like to do? And so what we can do is to design different tasks. Or if it's not tasks we're after, we can, for example, give students different questions, which is what you mentioned just now, for a reading text or something like that. So you could give one lot of students a task where they have to reproduce the information from a reading text in graphic form. And that's quite a higher order kind of activity, isn't it? And that demands a high level of comprehension and not necessarily giving the students that much support or help to do that. You could do that, and you can give another group some open-ended questions. And open-ended questions are more difficult to deal with than closed questions. What do I mean by open-ended questions? Yeah, we're talking about questions which have open answers. So, you know, what happened next, or why did he do that, or something like that. And then you can give another group multiple choice questions, which in some sense is significantly easier, because the brain processing which is demanded of students is clearly less. So you can do that. So you can give students different tasks. You can choose different questions. You can give students different guidance. So, for example, suppose students see a model text like this. Here we are. William Shakespeare. It seems to be on my brain for some reason, William Shakespeare. There you are. And I could say to you, my dear students, okay, that's a text about William Shakespeare. Now I want you to write a similar text about another famous, if you were discussing British literature, about another British writer called Jane Austen. So what you have to do is you have to go find out about Jane Austen and write a similar paragraph. So that'd be all right, wouldn't it? Can anyone quote any Jane Austen? Anyone quote the opening line of Pride and Prejudice?
She was a woman.
There it is. Can anyone quote the opening line without opening the book? It is a truth, universally acknowledged, that a young man in possession of a good fortune is in want of a wife. That's the opening sentence of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. And if you've seen the film, if you've read the book, you'll know that it's a bit like I was saying in my music thing yesterday. There's a Shakespeare play called Much Ado About Nothing, in which two people, a man and a woman, appear to hate each other. But we know that, of course, sooner or later, they're going to get together, even though the tension between them at the beginning is so obvious. And this is a plot that's been reproduced by Hollywood again and again and again. And Pride and Prejudice is exactly the same. You know, Darcy and what? Elizabeth absolutely hate each other and despise each other and are rude and horrible to each other, but we know, you kind of know it's obvious that it's all going to come good in the end. Anyway, sorry, that's completely not the point. So I could do that, but if I think you need more guidance, I could give you this and give you exactly the information you need, so that now your task when you write the paragraph about Jane Austen, similar to the original paragraph about William Shakespeare, is significantly easier because I've given you the information and pretty much the form. So it becomes almost slightly drill-like as a piece of writing. But I think you need it. You need that extra help. I've just seen, she's wearing a T-shirt and it says, "I'm so happy to see you." I think it's such a nice thing to have on your top. So we've got various options. We can give students different tasks, different questions, different guidance. And then, of course, the other thing is to be prepared for the finishing problem. What's the finishing problem? Fast finishes. And we need to be prepared for people who finish early. But actually, we also need to be prepared for people who finish late. Because there is nothing more frustrating if you're trying to do a task that the teacher has asked you to do, if the teacher stops the activity because some people have finished. And we always worry about the early finishers. But actually, we should also worry about the kind of interrupted finishers.
We can use them. We can use the early finishers, sign them up with the late
Cooperate, help together.
They can cooperate, they can help them, you can join them up. You can have your bag of tricks in your pocket for the finishers. You can have the extra task and things like that. So, by the way, forgive me, I know that nothing I've said right now is terribly exciting because it's stuff that we all talk about. There's one disadvantage to everything we've suggested so far. What's the main disadvantage to all of this? It means teachers have to work harder. It means teachers have to prepare more at home, prepare more stuff, get more ready. I'm not suggesting that preparing at home is somehow terrible, except when it's terrible. But let's be quite clear, if your approach to mixed ability is to have lots and lots of different stuff for the different abilities, or whatever you want to call them, it does imply more work. And you said at home, or something like that. She said it, or somebody said at home. And yes, that's more, if you like, more teacher homework. And you know, but it may pay dividends. We got different work. Maybe another way of looking at it is to, oh, by the way, here's an issue. I was involved in designing a course a few years ago, and we had a student's book for all the students, but we wanted to design 2 workbooks to accompany the student's book for students at different levels. So to try and even though it was a unified piece of material, to try and nevertheless within the framework to offer stimulation for the higher end and extra help for the lower end. I've got 2 questions to ask you. Let's say the course was called Your Turn. Just say it. That's the name of the course. What do you call the 2 workbooks? What do you call them? Because they need different names, because somebody, when you get them or when you buy them or when you hand them out, you need to say, those of you who are using Your Turn, And those of you who are using your turn, so what do you call them?
Your turn one. You can say extension for the second one. Your turn stages.
Your turn, I'm not so much your turn.
Your turn is listening.
The reason I ask you that, just as a thought, is it's a really difficult issue. Because just as you don't especially want to say to students, you're much better than everybody else, because that's not hugely useful. You don't want to say, you're not as good as everybody else. So how do you do it? What do you
That's
say?
why the word expansion is probably more diplomatic.
Extension. But then are you using the extension or not the extension? You're using extension.
Color coding. You turn blue.
Your turn blue and your turn red. Yeah, I mean that seems like a really good idea, except of course, yeah. Oh, you're red. By the way, I'm not suggesting there's any answer to that, but it's just an interesting kind of philosophical question to me. What do you say? How do you describe differing abilities? Here's the second question, which goes along with that, which is, which of the books is the bigger book, do you think?
Your turn.
The top one or the not so top one? It turns out, doesn't it, that probably the one for the lower level is going to be the bigger one.
It depends on the books. If you've got one and then you've got the more, say the extension one, with the tasks may be, the requirements may be the same, but one may be, it could be two ways. One could be just the standard exercises, and the other one could be the standard exercises plus extension, or the much more advanced level of the task.
She's saying it depends.
Depends on how you
the two most terrifying words in answer to any question. It depends. But it does depend. By the way, the reason for talking about this is not to offer any answers, but just to show a practical example of how difficult it is to deal with this kind of situation. I suppose in answer to the second question, it seems to me quite clear that people who are at a not quite so high a level probably need more, not less. There's a tendency sometimes to give them less because they can't deal with too much. But actually they probably need extra support, more language, more help, and so on and so forth. Anyway, that was a bit of an irrelevance. That was sorry?
More exercises, more practice, more instructions.
More exercise, more practice, more guidance perhaps, more information, more... Anyway, but another way, of course, is to give students different roles in classrooms, getting them to do things. And I'm very impressed with the idea that all students can do something. And somehow or other, we have to find the things that students can do, which may not be to do with English proficiency particularly, but we talk about different strengths and weaknesses, but that does mean that everyone's got strengths. And the job of a mixed ability teacher, which is to say all of us, is to try and find a strength for everybody and then allow that student to somehow, even if we're talking about something incredibly small, to find a way of harnessing that strength or allowing a student to demonstrate that strength. So that even if it's something to do with the way they write on the board or something, they get a chance to shine. I'm impressed by a man called George Petty, who writes books, one particular book for secondary teachers in the UK, especially. And it's a book of general pedagogy, general methodology, general classroom practice. And his response to this is to talk about medals and missions. Medals and missions. And he says the job of a teacher is to give students medals and missions because students like a medal. The problem is that overpraising students is a zero-sum game, because praise especially praise that is not necessarily earned, it loses its currency very, very quickly. And so, and in one study, it was an Essex University MA thesis some years ago, but very impressive. Research amongst students said the thing that really, I must say this in a polite way, the thing that really irritated students was when teachers praised them when they didn't think there was anything to praise them for. You know, oh wow, yeah, wonderful, oh great, fabulous, wonderful. What? and it, as I said, it loses its currency. But students do need that kind of affirmation. And so what George Petty says is there must be something in the lesson for everyone where you can give them a little medal. Well done, here's a medal. I'm not sure I like the terminology, but I understand the point. But he says that the whole point about medals is that they're opportunities for a mission, for a future mission. So when you give a medal, you say, well done, and in future, and then you send them forwards. So that if your particular, the thing that you can do is, I don't know, drawing, for example. Well, when we're doing an activity, maybe we'll get you to do the drawing, and then I can say, well done, the drawings are fantastic, by the way. Next time I'd like you to kind of do the drawing, but can you add an English sentence with it? Or something like that. And what we've done is we've given him affirmation. We've given him a medal. He can stand on the winner's podium. But we haven't just left it at that. We've said, and in future, here's your mission, should you wish to accept it. And even if you shouldn't. And I find that quite compelling as an idea. The whole issue is the issue of any group of students is a bunch of individuals with different strengths and different weaknesses. And somehow or other, although it's an impossible task with a group of 36 kids, somehow or other, we have to somehow try to speak to that individuality, those individuals, and see if we can find the key, the secret spot for each student. Now, we were talking yesterday, I mentioned the Cuban guy who wanted to play computer games, or the Greek woman who wanted to read fashion magazines. Well, one way is a desperate attempt by all of us to find out, it really pays dividends to find out what individual students, what turns them on. And if you can then, in conversation or in tasks or anything, kind of find a way of feeding that hunger for this thing, then we're in with a chance. It seems to go very well to me. What?
SWOT analysis.
Explain, please. She says SWOT analysis.
Weaknesses and strengths.
Mm-hmm.
You give them a chance to identify their own strengths, weaknesses. So you are giving them a chance to identify their own weaknesses, strengths, and based on their weaknesses, they can identify their own threats, and based on their strengths, they can look through different options, different opportunities. So, and you do the same task for yourself and see if there are some, matches. But you are not supposed to share what you think about, you're keeping this information, your own analysis to yourself. And then you are giving opportunities based on what they think about themselves.
So the SWOT analysis is absolutely a way of saying, what are my strengths and weaknesses? And instead of the teacher telling the student what their strengths and weaknesses, asking them to identify them. Not so they can share them with the whole class, but so that we're kind of putting it in the student's hands, saying, look, what's the best thing for you to do? You decide. It's not that easy because we are educationally more sophisticated, I hope, than some of the students we teach. Nevertheless, the moment that they have some ownership of who they are in the lesson, the chances are that then if you offer them, do you remember that menu of medium and spicy and food, they're in a better position to make their choice because they've thought about it. And the whole point about a learner is that they are the ones who matter in the classroom. Not the teacher doesn't matter very much. I mean, what we do matters, but we don't matter very much. What the students really matter, the learners really matter, because it's all about them doing the learning. And this analysis of their own is a way of saying you're in charge, you're the boss of your own learning. I would also like to see if I can somehow encourage the belief in students that their own individual identity is the most important thing they've got, if that makes any sense. That who they are matters, and unless they go around killing people or doing something terrible, being who they are is pretty okay. I thought I'd like to show you something that we used with some young learners, 10-year-olds, in Austria, which was an attempt to say to the students, look, we've all got strengths and weaknesses and different characters and so on. So I tell you what, why don't you take on whatever character you want to help you with your learning? And the characters in question were called the Sixes. And they're called the Sixes because, have a guess. Not the Sexes, the Sixes. The Sixes. They're called the Sixes because there are 6 of them. There you are. There's 6 of them. It's a bit silly. Anyway, here are the Sixes. There they are. And now, what you need to know is that each one of these characters has a defining characteristic. And so I'll tell you their names, and each one comes with an adjective which starts with the same letter as their name. So if you look at the one on the right, his name is Harvey. So what do you think his adjective is? Look at him. What? It begins with H. Horrible. That's horrible Harvey. And whatever happens, whenever you meet Harvey, he is always horrible. On the left is Harriet, the one, and she starts with H, and so she's happy. That's happy Harriet. She's always happy. Whatever she does, she's happy. If you look at the girl with dark hair, and her name is Sadie. And Sadie is always sad. Sadie is always sad. And then if you the girl with the glasses and the beret, her name is Carol. She's clever. She's really clever. She's clever. Very clever. And if you look at the guy with his back to you painting the sun, his name is Nick. Nice Nick. He's always nice. He's just very nice. And if you look at Sylvester, he's just really silly. He's just really silly. Now, this is just an idea. It's just an attempt to say to kids, look, we're all different, you know. There's no value judgment, and it has 2 purposes. And let me show you the purposes. I want my students to do a simple listening. But if I can show them the characters behaving like this, and because they know that the characters are unchanging and immutable, Harvey is always horrible, then that gives them a kind of an anchor, a clue, something to hang on to, and things like that. So this is all about teaching numbers, and it's a listening. You'll see what it's about. So we want them to be able to count, and teaching numbers and math. Some maths language. Here we go. I think. No, come back. Come back. Come back. Oh, I think I know what happened. It's my fault. I'm very stupid. Okay, let's try again.
Sylvester, what's 11 plus 10?
11 plus 10. 10 plus 11. Easy, easy. 11 plus...
Oh, hurry up, Sylvester.
Okay. It's 20.
20.
21.
Thank you. Carol,
Yes.
what's 45 minus 13?
32. Easy.
Okay. Thank you, Carol. Nick,
Yes?
what's 29 minus 6?
I think, 22? No, 24. Yes, that's it, 24.
Thank you, Nick. And finally, Sadie, what's 18 minus 5?
I don't know.
Come on, Sadie, have a go.
All right. Is it 13?
Yes, it is. Well done, Sadie.
So what's the point of that? Well, it's just a listening about numbers. But we give the kids something to hang on to, something to hopefully enjoy for a little bit. By the way, you don't go on with this forever. But this is kids' first level of English at the age of 10 in middle school in Austria, as it happens. And what we're saying to them, we're kind of exemplifying difference and variability and making it a positive feature. And then when we get the kids to speak, some of them are really quite reticent about speaking because they're very low level. But what we do for this, or what we did for this, and you'll see their teacher in a minute called Laura, and what Laura did was she's encouraging them to enjoy these silly characters. Well, no, only Sylvester is silly, but you know what I mean. These characters, enjoy them and allow them to, if you like, take on their identities to have fun. Let's see. Here is a bunch of kids, and they're just doing a simple...
I like apples, sweets, chocolate, and fries.
Okay, who is it? Enrica?
Are you ready?
Yes, okay.
I like apples and bananas.
Okay, who could it be?
Are you Nick?
Who wants to be the next? Alexander.
I love sweets.
Okay, who could it be? Cornelius.
Sylvester.
Are you honest?
Yes, I am.
So there are. There's some kids being sixes, and it's terribly silly. Well, he was, but the whole point about it is, it's actually saying individuality is what the world is like, and let's have a bit of fun with it and play with it. And the whole point about the sixes, of course, is to say, okay, kids, we're going to have to do, back to our whole issue about repetition and practice, we're going to have to do some of this practice saying I like, but we'll try and give it a little sort of individual kind of frisson, which also, by the way, allows you to kind of hide behind these characters. We know very well, don't we, that one of the chief functions of using puppets for young learners is the way in which kids will speak as and to puppets in a free way, much freer than they might speak if you ask them to speak as themselves. There's something about that taking on the identity of the puppet character, which thank you. I had, you know that, do you get that thing when you suddenly, your mind runs out of words for what it is you want to say? That takes away the responsibility or the risk factor of putting yourself out there, to use an English idiom. And so even with these silly little characters, what you're saying to the kids is go on, have a go, but it's not your fault. Go be Harvey. I like bananas. Okay. But at least you've done the language, but you didn't have to risk your life. You could just be Harvey, and that was fine. So that's one way of trying to give students different roles. And of course, the other different roles you can give students, if they're doing a speaking task, some people can do the lead in the speaking, some people can do note-taking, some people can do just introducing, there are all sorts of different roles in any task that students can do. On the subject of that, of course, we can put students in different groups. And that's a difficult one as well, because if you put students in ability groups, that's a bit of a shining a light on different weaknesses rather than different strengths sometimes. And we have to be careful with that. And a big discussion, which I'll end with in a bit, but not so much the discussion, but an answer, is whether students do better to be grouped according to strengths and weaknesses, or whether they do better to be all together. Do you have a view on that yourselves? Is it better in a group of 36 to group, if you put students in groups, would you prefer to put them in groups which have people of the same ability in each group, or would you prefer to mix them? Mix them, hands up. Different strengths and weaknesses, hands up. I would say we're pretty much a mixed culture in this room. The problem about it is that the evidence is entirely contradictory. Entirely contradictory. And what is it? She's just used the magic words. What's the answer to the question? It depends. It depends. Yes, I don't want to be facetious.
The point is they will achieve something if you group them stronger with weaker students.
If you group, there is some powerful arguments in favor of mixing them up, which says that everyone achieves something. And strong students often gain benefit from helping and thinking about how to help weaker students, and weaker students learn from stronger students. The danger, of course, is the danger that stronger students feel as if they're held back from what they want to do. Or that weaker students take a back seat and decide to relax. And in that context, I was fascinated a few years ago to meet finally a man that I had read when I was a student, a man called William Littlewood, Bill Littlewood. And when I was a student in 1923, his book, that was a joke, but it wasn't a very good joke. His book called Communicative Language Teaching was a terribly important book for me. So when I met him, by which stage he was probably about 75 or something, it was a real thrill. And he was talking about groups and tasks. And he said there's a real problem in group work. And the problem is the problem of what he called social loafers. Social loafers. Now, to loaf is a very low frequency English word. To loaf around means just to be really lazy. And in my mind, I have a picture of someone before the smoking ban, you know, sort of sitting there in a deck chair with a glass of champagne and a cigarette, just, and his worry about most group work is that in most groups, and this may be the danger we've just identified, you'll get 2 or 3 students doing the work, and then the rest having the champagne and smoking the cigarette and just kind of watching and just relaxing and letting everyone else take the strain. And he came up with what to me is such an elegantly simple and obvious solution that I can't believe I didn't think of it first. It's just called numbered heads. And numbered heads, and this, by the way, answers the stronger-weaker issue. And numbered heads, it says this, that the teacher says that each group needs a letter of the alphabet. So they choose a letter of the alphabet. And they tell the teacher which letter they are, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, or something. And then within each group, the students number each other. 1, 2, 3. So you're 1, you're 2, you're 3, you're 4, you're 5. Consecutively, so 1 to 6 or something. They number each other, but what they don't do is they do not tell the teacher who's who. And the students do the activity. When the activity is over, the teacher says, okay, so who is going to summarize what you did in your group? I think we'll have B5. And the beauty of this little elegant solution is that I don't know who 5 is. And 5 knows that I don't know. Which means that every student has the expectation that it could be them. And the result of that is you don't want to lose face when the teacher says B5 and it's you. You don't want to go, bleh. So the idea of this is just to try and ensure that everyone, even the loafers, even the lazy ones, and even the weaker ones, if it comes to that, are fully engaged with what's going on. And I find that an elegant solution. It's not perfect. I did it, funny enough, the first time I met Ade was at a conference in the UK. And I was doing this in a teacher development workshop. And I actually tried this out. And they were teachers. And you know what teachers are like. Tricky, you know, tricky people. And, oh God, sorry. Anyway, so I said, okay, so let's have group B4. And so someone said what they had to say, and I was really pleased until they told me the trick, which is they decided that whatever number I said, it was going to be this student. So, of course, it's not foolproof, and students love tricking teachers anyway. I don't know what tricks students have played on you, but certainly my daughters used to come back from secondary school with amazing stories of, you know, how they purposefully mixed their names up. And there was one class when they had a class competition to see if a student could spend the whole class under a table and the teacher wouldn't notice. And they won, and so on. But so students do tricky stuff. But nevertheless, I think this is such an elegant solution. Of course, another way to deal with differing mixed ability, which is what I hope we do all the time, is to respond differently to different students. To respond differently to different students. And so that I have a feeling in my lesson that when you say something, I'll respond in this way because I think you need that kind of support. But when you say something, I'll respond differently. All of these things, by the way, are things that are part and parcel of our normal teaching life. Another way of dealing with mixed ability is to give students different choices, allowing them to choose the tasks. We've already alluded to that. Do you want bland, medium, or spicy? Do you want the main course or the dessert? Do you want to be Harvey or Sylvester? What do you want to do? Different students can choose different tasks, but that is problematic. By far, for me, the most ideal situations are situations where students get the same, but respond differently because that's the way it is. Because if I give this room a task, well then, not everyone is going to perform the task as straightforwardly and easily as everybody else. But I hope you would all get something out of it. Maybe at different levels. So that's what we're going to do. And you need a pen and a piece of paper. A pen and a piece of paper. What's the time? No, sorry, bye-bye. I was going to tell you the story of Ferdinand the Bull. But ask me to tell you about Ferdinand the Bull later, because it's rather fun. We're going to go to the kind of flexible response which says that the same task is responded to flexibly by other students. The most obvious way of that is Seth Lindstromberg wrote a lovely article and made the very obvious point that you can say to students, I want you to write 12 sentences using this language. Actually, what I want you to do is to write up to 12 sentences, but you must write as many as you can, so that the strong students will write 12 and the weak students will write 2, and there'll be a range of sentences. It's a bit like this task. This involves you writing in the left-hand side of your piece of paper the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 to 40, 1 to 40. So you need to write a column or 2 columns of numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 20, 21, 22, to 40. Will you do that now, please? It's absolutely vital. You have to do this. The numbers 1 to 40, with a space beside each number for you to write a word. The numbers 1 to 40. The numbers 1 to 40. And tell me, just put your hand up when you've done it. Have you done it? Quickly, 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 please, quickly. Because I can feel time's winged chariot riding by, to use a line from poetry. Hurry, 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 because this doesn't work unless you... Have you done it? Have you done it? What?
I don't have paper.
Well, have you got a phone? Well, do it on the phone. Do it on the phone. You're going to write on your phone. Have you done it? Have you done it? Yeah. At the back there, you think sitting at the back, you don't have to do it. You have to do it. Otherwise, remember what I said yesterday. If you don't do it, I will kill you. Okay, it's an empty threat because it didn't. Yes. Are you ready? Shh, shh. Now, the absolutely vital ingredient in this activity is silence. Silence. I don't want anyone shouting anything out. This is an activity designed to be responded to flexibly but individually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you and show you a poem. But 40 words have been blanked out. And you must try and guess what the words are. I know this sounds really boring. Trust me.
It is not.
So you must try and guess what the words are. The moment you guess a word, write it down. But when you write a word down, it does not mean that later you can't cross it out and write another word in its place. It's a guessing. The moment you guess, have a go and see if it works. I have a warning. The first time you hear this poem, it's not going to go very well. Are you ready?
Yes.
Here we go. One as you out of the rings. Shh. If you dare say anything, nothing will happen. Shh. So one as you out of the rings. Wrapped in a you it. As you up the door Shh. Just try and guess, even though it's impossible. You ask the to on. Going into the you the merest on the Stay with me, stay with me. Would you mind, you explain? Would you mind, you explain? I'm, the door to, you hurry back to take the call. The at the is to you, You hear the click, in the you, Okay, now look. I'm guessing there may be one or two people in here who have one or two words already. Shh. But they may be the right words, they may not be. But for many of you, this is all a bit like walking in thick fog. There's nothing there. So I'll tell you what I'll do, because I don't like, this is the last session and I don't want you to end feeling, frustrated or irritated or anything. So what I'll do is I'll show you the poem again, but this time I'll give you the first letter of each word and see if that helps. Would that be a good idea? Yeah. Okay, remember, what's the rule of this activity? Silence. So no calling out words. You ready? One as you out of the Please. The rings. Shh. Silence. Wrapped in a you it. As you up the door you ask the to on. Going into the shh. You the merest on the is a Sorry, I'll say it again. No, on the is a Would you mind you explain? I'm on the the door to, you hurry back to take the call. The at the is to you You hear the click in the you Okay, how are we getting on? Don't tell any words. How are we getting? Is the fog beginning to clear? It's beginning to clear. Some shapes coming out of the fog. Everyone's got at least one or two words they think they know, right? But some of you probably have more than that, and some of you have less than that, because you know what? We're in a room with different strengths and different weaknesses. Or, maybe that's the wrong thing. We're in a room with different past experiences to base on, and maybe different varieties of English to work with, and so on and so forth. So I tell you what I'll do, because as I said, the whole point of this is to send, we must all go home happy, otherwise the whole of this British Council event has been a disaster. So what I'll do this time is I'll give you the poem again, but this time I'll give you the first 2 letters of every word. How does that sound? And see if that helps. Are you ready? Okay. Here we go. And this is where silence becomes very difficult. But please, please, if you can, try not to shout with happiness when you see the word. Yes, yes. Shh. Okay, here we go. One as you out of the
Please don't tell
No, but you need to hear the rhythm of the line. That's the problem. I'm the boss.
We are the majority.
Oh, damn. The rings. Wrapped in a you it. As you up the door, You ask the to on. Going into the you the merest on the is a Sorry. Would you mind, you explain, I'm on the the door to, you hurry back to take the call. The at the is to you You hear the click in the you How are you getting on? The fog is really beginning to clear now, isn't it, for some people? It's, I mean, there must be quite a few words you pretty much can be sure of. There's still fog, but it's like when there's a breeze coming, and so on. And we can go on like this. If I want to, I'll give you now the first 3 letters of each word, which means that 1 or 2 words will be there in total, and so on and so forth. But this is the poem that I read you. Okay? I will. So there it is. Now look. Put up your hands if after the second go you had a kind of reasonable view of what the poem was about. Put up your hands. And put up your hands if you were still pretty much at sea. And the fact is some people in this room. And put up your hands if you were in between, which is the rest. But for me, that's an example of an activity which which works for everybody. Now, if I had people in this room who are zero beginners, it would work for nothing at all. But that's an ability or a mixture of abilities so extreme that an entirely different approach is called for. But just a couple of linguistic things which interest me. If you look at the last two lines on this screen, did anyone get the word fraction? No. And yes, you did. Now, you see, that is very interesting. One person in this room of highly good English speakers got the word fraction. Why? Because merest fraction is a very strong collocation, but it's very infrequent. So you must have had exposure to it, maybe in some British English context or British English literature or something like that. And only the people who've had that experience will get that. It's an absolutely strong collocation. So if you said to me, the merest, even if there was no context, I'd probably say fraction, because it's so strong. The problem is it's very much variety dependent, and it's very infrequent. What about pleasing stranger? Did anyone get stranger? I'm really impressed, because there's no collocational information to help you with that, and so on. My argument for this kind of activity is, number one, I had your absolute attention for the whole of that activity, which is better than I've had all weekend. No, I'm being silly, but the fact is everyone was working individually at their own level, but working really, really intensely to do this. Concentrating like mad. And it seemed to me this is a mixed ability activity. Oh, and by the way, the other thing it is an activity that works for any size of class, from 5 to 1,000. Everyone can do it. So there we are. One other thing to tell you about, there's one other activity which also allows students to be flexible tasks. And I'll just show you a couple of examples. It'll take about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. This is a poetry activity called You. And what you're asked to do with You, and please try this out with friends or something, or with a class. What you're asked to do with You is to think about somebody you love. Somebody you love. It can be your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your husband, your wife, your other wife, it can be your children, it can be anything, your dog, it can be anything you want. So, your job? No, it has to be a living thing. Okay, your job's a living thing. Will you stop being difficult? It's seriously, just somebody you love. Okay? And so, just in your own minds, just choose somebody you love, so you can think about this while I describe it. And then I ask you to write about this person as if they were a food. So, for example, you are, I don't know, a beautiful, you're a beautiful lamb shank in gravy, or something. And then I can ask you to write about this person as if you were, for example, a piece of furniture. As if they were a piece of furniture. You are a beautiful polished table. You are a comfortable couch. You are, and then I can ask you to write about this person as if you were, as if they were a form of transport, or an animal, or anything, or a month of the year. And it's a beautiful activity. And here are two examples of this poem produced by 9-year-old kids in Cambridge. Here's the first one. And just have a read. This is. And I hope you agree with me that for a 9-year-old boy, this is quite moving, really. And by the way, I know the boy in question, and he was a recent immigrant from Bangladesh. His English was not yet perfectly developed, but he wrote this wonderful poem. Is it a poem? It sort of is. This poem about his mother, and you can sense the emotion and the love in it. And I'll just show you one more. This is a 9-year-old girl, and she's writing about her uncle. Okay, so I don't know about you, but I find that really funny and rather moving. And I think for a 9-year-old kid to describe their uncle as a door that needs oiling, but isn't it extraordinary? It's also got great beauty in it. To describe your uncle as an October morning when grass is crisp. It's absolutely beautiful. And there's a lot of love in this one as well. Now, why am I showing you? Well, I like them. I know the two kids involved, as it happens. And I know the uncle as well. So, but this is just a primary class in Cambridge. And yes, sure, these aren't students learning English, although Dulal, the boy, the Bangladeshi boy, is not yet reached the level the young man who now exists has, which is perfect fluency. But the beauty of this activity is it's an activity for everyone in the class. And if you are creative, you may very well write an October morning when grass is crisp, which is quite a high order kind of metaphor. But if you don't particularly have that, you can write, you are October. And you've still done the task at your level of ability. So for me, and that's why I call this talk All Together, what interests me most about mixed ability classes are ones where everyone can work together, but even with a task for everyone at their own flexible speed. And both of the last activities, I hope, have proved that that can be so. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bell School. Health. What did I do? Well, I'll tell you what I did. The first activity I did was very like I Caught a Falling Baby. It wasn't I Caught a Falling Baby. It was the story of a boy who got his arm bitten off by a shark. And it's an extraordinary story, which I don't have time to tell you. But send me an email and I'll send you a link to it. But it's an incredible story. So I told the story. Remember, some of these people hardly spoke English at all. But I told the story with lots of gestures, and there was a gun, boom, 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 and the shark, yeah, like this. And at one stage, a man actually picks the shark up, so I sort of went like this. So even the people who didn't speak hardly any English sort of got an idea of what was going on, or at least they got some fun out of it. And then I told it again, and then I simplified it down and told it again, and just like the I Caught a Falling Baby, I got them to write down the words they heard, and then they shared the words they heard, and then I told the story again, and they shared the words they heard. So at least the people whose English wasn't very good, or hardly good at all, got to hear English, and the same English 2 or 3 or 4 times, in a kind of expanded, overacted version, which is what you've been saying about storytelling and about, you know, and also in a condensed and very controlled version. And then when it was all over, I put them in groups, and they had these big flip chart pieces of paper, and they had to write their version of the story. And guess what? Without me saying anything, some of the students whose English was really, really bad, you know what they did? They drew sharks, and drew sharks on the paper, doing exactly what we were saying about individuals finding something they can do. And although it wasn't perfect, it seemed to be a satisfying solution to a terrible problem, which was how the hell do I deal with this group? And it sort of worked. By the way, it wasn't my idea. This came out of discussion with other people. I'm not taking any credit for this. But it sort of allowed all of the students to participate at some level or other. The rest of the 2 weeks were a disaster. But that's another story. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the end. I can't believe we've reached the end. Thank you so, so much for coming here and being here. And,